Welcome back to the Man Cave. I want to talk to you today about the hottest of hot topics, immigration. There's been so much discussion about this in the last few days following the very high-profile speech of Shabana Mahmood from the Labour Party, in which she's talked about apparently clamping down hard on immigration, on illegal immigration, and apparently has outraged hordes of left-wing supporters all over the country by speaking of how she was going to introduce tougher measures in order to try and control, apparently, illegal immigration, reduce its numbers, and reduce the considerable impact it has on British people and wider society. I want to put a bit of background to this. Let's put it into a little bit of context. And let's start with our old friend Tony Blair. Many of you will remember that when he came to power, he spoke in terms of rubbing the noses of the right in diversity. And following, in the years that followed, he became well known for deliberately setting out to attract vast numbers of immigrants into this country, many from the Middle East and Sub-Saharan Africa, also through the EU at that time. And the right of freedom of movement in the EU, which our membership guaranteed, enabled many people to come to this country through porous open borders with no checks whatsoever. And the outcome of this on our society was pronounced. The pressures on housing, on health, on transport, on education, on all of our essential public services, from vast numbers of people coming to the country who had previously had no right to come here, but who were actively encouraged to come here by Tony Blair. When we fast forward a few years through the Conservative administration, and we find that following Brexit, we were assured that all of this would come to an end, that the open borders would be closed, and that we'd regain control of our borders and once again enable right to come to this country to be restricted to people who truly showed that they deserved the privilege. Of course, in effect, that never happened. What really happened was that the numbers of people from the EU reduced, but the numbers of people from outside the EU actually increased. And for a long time, a lot of us, me included, tried to understand how this could possibly be under a Conservative so-called government, which told us one thing and then seemed to actively pursue a completely different policy and ideology. And of course, there was a lot of obfuscation going on. There was a lot of smoke and mirrors. And we were told that it was necessary to have legal migration for the good of our economy. And there was a lot of denial. A lot of people started to talk about the rates of illegal migration in the backs of lorries and then later on in small boats, rubber dinghies. And for a long time, we were all dismissed as liars and as racists. And we were told that there wasn't a problem. There was nothing to see here. The likes of Tommy Robinson started to talk more about this and started to open people's eyes to what was truly going on. And of course, he was smeared and dismissed in all of that fashion, in the most absolute of terms, fundamentally criminalised. And fundamentally, anybody who dared to agree with him or speak up in similar terms was similarly treated by a politicised establishment. So what happened with the Conservative Party wasn't what was promised. We didn't get that recognition of the need to control our borders. We didn't see a reduction in the number of people who were coming to this country illegally or under the faint veneer of asylum. What we actually saw was a dramatic increase. And as time went on, it became more and more impossible for the Conservative Party to deny that increase. They had to start to tell the truth because the truth became abundantly apparent. They were forced into that position. And that became one of the main arguing points of the general election. And throughout the general election campaign, the Labour Party, of course, continually criticised the Conservative Party for allowing all of that to happen. But if you ever questioned them or looked more carefully into what they were saying, fundamentally they were all saying, yes, isn't it dreadful that we have this massive increase in illegal immigration? But our suggested way forward for this is much more of the same poison. It's awful that the Conservatives have let all of these people come into the country illegally, but we'll let in many more. That was the underlying message. So when, in the general election campaign, Keir Starmer spoke about smashing the gangs, I looked at that, and perhaps with my usual slightly cynical view, I interpreted that as, well, there's one way of looking at it, and there's another way of looking at it. And that way is that it's not so much smashing the gangs by destroying them, more making them redundant. And fundamentally, it seemed to me that what the Labour Party was likely to do was to maintain the work of Tony Blair and to actually actively gerrymander the nation and to encourage ever-increasing more numbers to come to this country rather than reducing that number, as perhaps they wanted to suggest to voters that they would. Why are they doing that? Why would they want to? I think there's a couple of reasons for that, and the main one is purely ideological. I think that the Labour Party endemically views people from other cultures and other countries as being superior to British people, and they can't help but maintain a barely hidden contempt for British people who they feel deserve to have their noses rubbed in it. They hate our history. They hate our traditions. They hate everything that we have given to the world, and they seek to deny it. They seek to deny not just our culture, but actually our identity. And they are determined to destroy all of those things. And what better way to destroy it than by flooding it with people from other cultures and parts of the world? So there we have it. When we returned a Labour government, what did we see? Did we see a decreasing immigration, or did we see an increase? We all know the truth. The numbers have increased dramatically. The numbers of illegal migrants and legal migrants, people who come to this country by illegal means, has massively increased. More than 100,000 since the general election last July, as far as we can tell. And we all know the pressures that has put onto British society, not least the financial pressures. Apparently it costs around £8 million a day, just to house them, just to put them in hotels, to feed them, to give them their daily allowance, their meals, everything they wish for, their mobile phones. And what we saw in the last few days was a tough talk from Shabana Mahmood, because they're finally confronted with the true feelings of British people about this. People who've seen illegal migrants kept in luxury, allowed to move freely in our societies, and quite obviously being responsible for committing a large amount of serious crime. We've all read about murders. We've all read about rapes. We've read about robberies. We see the names of the people who've committed those crimes. We've seen large-scale atrocities, which we all understand to be based on an ideological preference. An ideological preference from the immigrants themselves, but an ideological preference that is not contained by our government. People feel increasingly that they are prejudiced against as British people in their own country, in favour of people who quite clearly have no legal right to be here. And the tough talk that we saw from Shabana Mahmood, it seemed to me from the moment, wasn't grounded in an understanding that this had to be confronted and properly dealt with to the satisfaction of the British people, but that words should be used in order to quell them, to satisfy them, to pacify them, whilst continuing as far as possible to pursue their preferred ideological path. So we've had talk now of illegal migrants being given only temporary stay in this country and being forced to return to their home countries when those home countries become safe. We've had talk that they're going to have their benefits taken away, that they'll no longer be entitled to have a home and food and all of the allowances that they are given. We've had a few other assurances as well. All of those are designed to make you feel that there's been this great volte-face from the Labour Party, and that suddenly they've reversed their ideological stance and are determined to once again prioritise the British people ahead of people who shouldn't be here. And then we read this morning the truth. And the truth is that rapidly following from the tough talk, Shabana Mahmood has announced that instead what they're going to be doing is increasing the number of safe paths to this country so that people can come here if they are called refugees and claim asylum without having to use people smugglers and without having to face the hurdles that they have faced in the past and would face under any reasonable government that prioritised the needs and security of its own citizens. So there we have it. What's going to really happen? What's going to happen is, as I predicted somewhat cynically, that yes, we are going to see the smashing of the gangs. But we're not going to see the smashing of the gangs in terms of them being criminalised, identified and dealt with through the courts. We're going to see them being made redundant. And we're going to be seeing them made redundant in the same way that they were redundant under Tony Blair, in that fundamentally anybody who wants to come to this country is going to find that it's far easier for them to get here without having to go through all the unpleasant hurdles of paying a people smuggler or getting on a small boat. Come on in, call yourself a refugee. The Labour Party will take pity on you, and all of the tough talk is just empty rhetoric. All of the tough talk is dependent on there being a political will to enact it. And make no mistake, no matter what Shabana Mahmood might promise you, when people turn up in this country in the future and claim asylum under a Labour government, they won't be dealt with harshly because there is no political will to deal with them harshly. They will be welcomed. They will not find themselves without a roof and without warm meals and comfortable beds and a subsistence and mobile phones and new clothes and priority in healthcare and priority wherever it's needed should children ever arrive in this country in education. And all the while, the mug British taxpayer is the one who foots the bill. And he doesn't just foot the direct bill of paying for all of that. He also foots the bill of the extra houses that need to be made. He gets pushed further down the queue for his own healthcare. He finds the roads ever more congested. He finds essential public services harder and harder to access. You pay more and more to receive less and less. And that is the ideological preference of the Labour Party, and the words that are used by Shabana Mahmood and by Keir Starmer are nothing more than empty rhetoric and lies designed to mollify you and leave them in peace to foist their ideological preference on you at your cost. I'm sorry to be so negative, here in my place of sanctuary, surrounded by my toys, but Britain, you deserve the truth. See you soon.